differences. We will have differences in the future. But what we must do is to find a way to see that we can have differences without being enemies in war.
Daily flashback to this day in 1972 when President Richard Nixon left for his historic trip to China. Close to 8,000 people attended the departure ceremony on the White House lawn, including federal employees and 1,000 school children who were bussed in to see the president off on a historic trip, which set up what the current diplomatic relationship we have now with China. The culture wars are back, on the other hand. Passions flared at a Thursday House hearing on contraception, which featured only men as witnesses on the first panel.
Our country, for hundreds of years, has understood that faith comes first.
Where are the women? When I look at this panel, I don't see one single woman.
We've been denied the right to have a witness.
I may at some point be moved to explain biology to my colleagues. Imagine they're having a panel on women's health and they don't have any women on the panel. Duh.
Let's bring in our panel. David Drucker is a staff writer for Roll Call, also the best-dressed man on Capitol Hill. Karen Finney is an MSNBC political analyst and former communications director for the DNC. And Manu Raju is Politico's senior congressional reporter, the Terminator there, along with Jake Sherman. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Good to be here.
Culture wars seem to be back in the lexicon of American politics. We all thought this election was going to be about the economy. We've sort of taken a shift to the culture wars. Listen to Rick Santorum on CBS this morning.
This is the same gotcha politics that you get from the media. Every supporter who says something, now I'm going to have to respond to it. Look, this is what you guys do. I mean, you don't do this with President Obama. In fact, with President Obama, what you did was you went out and defended him against someone who he sat in a church for.
Now, that was Rick Santorum talking about Foster Freeze, obviously his big donor, who said that a contraception method could be putting Bayer aspirin between ladies' knees. Obviously, he's apologized for that.
I think
but we're back to culture wars.
As an Advil fan, I am offended.
But Karen, you're a strategist. How does this play? The culture wars are back. You know, they seem to creep up in these lately. We all thought 2004 was going to be about terrorism, and then wedge issues.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, I guess this means the Republicans think that the economy's doing better enough that we should now go to the culture wars, because that has been kind of the bread and butter issues that they've used. I would remind Rick Santorum that his guys brought this up, right? And when we got into this whole discussion about the president and the accommodation with the church, I mean, a couple things. You're seeing the Republican Party. It's very interesting to me. I don't understand what these guys are thinking. They're now aligned with the Vatican. The vast majority, I'm a Catholic, the vast majority of American Catholics don't agree with the Vatican on a lot of these issues, but they've gone so far to the right. And then you have this comment about, you know, aspirin between your knees, and that's just the least of it. I mean, Santorum also, remember his comments about women in combat and, you know, women who work outside the home were just really selfish, not recognizing that, particularly in this economy, for a lot of families, the woman's income has been the only income that a lot of these families have had. So it's not only culture wars, but it's completely out of line with how people's lives in America are lived in the 21st century.
I think that it's understandable that Republicans have pushed this issue, if you look at it from a religious freedom and First Amendment issue, which many Republicans, including non-Catholics, are very concerned about. Going forward, though, I would say that it's problematic for Republicans and for their presidential candidate or candidates to focus on this to the detriment of the economy. Even if the economy is improving, it's still not going to be most likely going like gangbusters by the fall. Yeah. And to sort of seed the issue, to sort of stipulate that, yeah, Barack Obama has turned around the economy, we need to now focus on other things, I think they're going to do their chances of beating the president a disservice, because there's still a case to be made that you might feel a little better, you might think you're doing a little bit better, but unemployment's still over 8%. It could get worse. Why waste the argument?
You obviously cover the Senate. Mitch McConnell said his goal was to make make sure that President Obama did not win re-election. Do you think the sort of establishment guys, the McConnells, the Boehners, the Cantors, the guys who are all about preserving their majority and winning the White House, do they like these culture wars coming back up?
I don't think so. I mean, you haven't really seen much debate about this at all under Mitch McConnell's tenure as a Republican leader. And I think that you're probably going to see these issues sort of recede in the coming weeks. They're going to bring the economy back as a main issue. They think that, like David said, this is an issue that they can win on. Even if there are signs of recovery, there are still millions who are underemployed, and there are promises that were made that they think they can pin the president for not keeping. And you're going to see that shift back, I think, in the coming weeks, and these debates will sort of recede.
But, you know, I would just say, you know, women will remember. They may try to move on, but to a lot of women, conservative women, this whole conversation is sort of a, what? Wait a second, we're talking about contraception? We're not even talking about abortion. I mean, it is a very basic fact that so many women, 58% of women, take contraception for reasons other than birth control. I mean, so it's a very basic thing, and I think women will remember.
Last week it seemed, though, the GOP was sort of winning the narrative, though, by saying that the president had overstepped his authority. He was trying to tell churches and religious organizations how to dictate. It seems the Democrats have sort of taken back the momentum this week, saying it's the war on women.
And I think
the accommodation that the president made was able to diffuse the Democratic Party split, and that's why it's made it easier for the president to move on.
And it splits the Catholic, too.
You don't have Tim Kaine, Joe Manchin, and Joe Lieberman complaining anymore, and I think that's a big part of it.
Joe Lieberman, that big Catholic.
Yeah, big.
Our panel will stick around for more.